What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are here with DC
K.O.
and Batman and Superman fight Absolute Batman and Absolute Superman. So, screw the introductions, let's get into it. So this picks up and it says, now we come to it, the penultimate battle, and the champions are ready, more than ready. Why? Because this round, they are not fighting other champions. They are not fighting heroes. They are not fighting friends. They are fighting imposters. At least that's how they see this Dark Trinity before them. Because something to know, this is Absolute Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. It's not copies, this is actually them. But the comic does explain how they get here, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But it says younger, bigger, but imposters just the same. And the combatants of the King Omega tournament have fought imposters many times before, but these imposters hail from the absolute Earth, where Darkseid is king, his essence infused into every atom and every cell. And with this Earth belonging to Darkseid, it begs the question, who's the real ones now? In this arena, there is only one way to find out. And in that moment, Absolute Superman just says, die, and immediately goes after Superman, right? And says, the blast hits Clark with the micro-concentrated heat of a supernova. It's as if the boy can funnel the sun's energy through his gauntlets. But the cape is what really catches Clark off guard. It's like cosmic dust the young fighter can shape. And the dust itself, it's from Krypton. Right now, this is cool because there's a question mark here. So seemingly the Heart of Apocalypse did not know that, which is kind of mind-boggling, right? But he says, Diana pulls Absolute Superman off of Superman, but before she can lock the chokehold, Absolute Wonder Woman leaps into the fight and immediately attacks Wonder Woman, right? And the two of them start going at it. So at that point, Absolute Batman switches over to Lex Luthor. Yes, Batman does show up, and when he does, it is amazing, right? Because it says, meanwhile, Luthor's suit has enough energy left for one last big blast. This person coming at him is just a Batman. So he opts for elephant tranquilizers and fires them off, right, at Absolute Batman, which is not going to work. And that's when it says, at which point Luthor opts for plan B. Because lest we forget, right, Absolute Batman, this guy is a hoss, right? 6'9", pretty much 7 feet, 400 something pounds. The guy's gigantic, right? So firing off elephant tranquilizers seemingly doesn't work on him, to say nothing of the fact that he's powered by Darkseid. And so that's where Luthor looks over at the Joker and says, shoot him, Joker, shoot him now. And in fact, Joker doesn't. He shoots at Lex. And at that moment, Absolute Batman is just like, okay. And Joker just says, actually, I would like to switch sides. Now, it is a little disappointing we do not get to see Joker fight Absolute Batman. That would have been amazing. That would have been incredible to see the two of them fight. We don't get it, and it's not a deal breaker, it's not a huge deal, but it is a little disappointing on some level, right? But that's where, when Joker says he wants to switch sides, Darkseid, right, inside of Booster Gold's form says, you cannot do that. And Joker asks, why, right? Because Darkseid should have 4 horsemen, not just 3. And so Darkseid tells him, you will forfeit your chance to win the tournament. And Joker responds, I mean, I got to kill Batman with a bang, so I'm good, right? And so at that point, Darkseid says, okay, cool, great Heart of Apocalypse. And Heart of Apocalypse turns Joker into a parademon, a wholly unique parademon that we have never seen before. And so in that moment, Superman calls out, right, and asks the question, who are these beings? And Wonder Woman tells Superman everything she knows. She says, when I asked Barda about the Heart of Apocalypse's weakness, she said that the heart, it corrupts people. And so that's where Luthor's just kind of like, so what are you saying, right? That we appeal to these creatures' gentler nature? But that's when Darkseid says they have no gentler nature. This is what they were born for. And now they have fulfilled their destiny. And that's where Wonder Woman asks, then what about you, Booster? And that's where Lex fills everyone in and says, I heard from Grodd that we were betrayed, but I never would have guessed that it was you, Booster Gold. Because keep in mind, they didn't know what was going on outside of the tournament. And outside of the tournament, Booster Gold was infected with and possessed by Darkseid. And that's how he turned against everyone who was helping to keep time intact, everyone who was helping on the outside, the whole 9 yards. And that's why he's shown up here. Because at that point, Booster Gold reveals everything. Not necessarily in terms of monologue, but in terms of his voice. Because he says, do not blame poor Booster. He is not at fault. And then his voice shifts, and it becomes the voice of Darkseid. And he says, my will is undeniable. And that's where Superman's just like, Darkseid, right? And at that point, Darkseid just says, nice to see you again, Kryptonian. Now, my horsemen, kill them all. And in that moment, Absolute Wonder Woman just says, run her down, Pegasus. And so the two of them are back on to the fight, right? And Wonder Woman says, thank you, right? After all this time, I finally get to lasso an actual horse. And where she does manage to take out Pegasus, right? Just send that thing flying. When she walks up to Wonder Woman, she says, talk to me. When my lasso touched you, I sensed nothing but Darkseid's essence. There must be more. And Absolute Wonder Woman tells her, you know, I have a lasso too. It's called Sacrifice, and it doesn't just make people talk, because it does allow her to shapeshift. Keep that in mind, right? It allows Absolute Wonder Woman to change her form. And so at that point, you jump over to Absolute Superman and Superman, right? And the heart tells us, at the same time as Clark and the boy rocket towards each other yet again, Clark scans him on a cellular level. Nothing. All three of these beings know what he knows, wants what he wants. There's nothing to them but him. And that's where he says Darkseid, because they are all top to bottom Darkseid. They are born and bred in Darkseid, which is true. Keep in mind, the Absolute Universe was entirely restructured and permeated with Darkseid's Omega energy. And so the heart says, and when the two Supermen collide with the power of 52 megatons, Clark is barely able to reabsorb the energy to protect his allies from being obliterated. And so that's when Absolute Superman looks at him and just says, is that the best that you can do? Is that the best you have? Now, at that point, we switch again, right? The heart says, and across the way, you've got Joker facing off against Lex. And Joker says, hello, neighbor, mind if I borrow some kryptonite? And rips the kryptonite out of Lex Luthor's suit and just says, hey, Bats, a gift from me to you. And he throws it to Absolute Batman, who breaks the piece of kryptonite in half and then stabs Superman with it. And so at that point, we switch back over to the game that was being played between Batman, Superman, Lois, and Wonder Woman, right? That's kind of been a major theme throughout the entirety of the story. And of course, Bruce Wayne basically won, right? The game as you would expect. Now, this is stupendously awesome, right? Because at that moment, Diane is just like, nice sportsmanship, Bruce, right? And Bruce just says, what? Like, I didn't see him there, right? And Superman just says the guy who's been cheating all game. And that's where Batman's like, what? Like, I don't cheat, right? And so Superman says, really, right? You need to roll a 4, you get a 4. You need to roll a 2, you get a 2. Do not tell me you're not using some kind of bat gadget. And so at that point, Batman's like, okay, do you want to know the truth, right? And that's when you switch over, right? Superman being attacked by Absolute Batman and Absolute Joker, with Joker saying like, let me do it. I've always wanted to kill a Superman, right? You kind of jump back to that moment with Bruce, right? And he says, the truth is, I learned the precise imperfections in the dice the first few times I held them. It's a technique I learned in my training years. So yes, I roll what I want to roll, but it's not cheating. It's called being Batman, which is amazing. I absolutely love that statement. And so in the midst of all of this, right, there's a light in the sky, right? This dude, Batman, arrives onto the battlefield like Jesus, right? Like literally the heart says, suddenly they all felt it, someone coming into the competition, and Joker feels it most of all because he gets a spear through the chest, right? He gets stabbed right through the chest. And that's where Superman looks over and is like, Batman, right? And Batman finally on the scene, right? He just greets Superman, hello, old friend. And Superman asks how. And so for the guys who didn't read the Batman tie-in or didn't see the Batman tie-in that we covered, right? Night Fight, it's kind of wrapped up here. He says, before we entered the competition, I wired a mother box to my heart. So if I died, I would be transported out. The heart made me fight my way through heaven and hell as punishment for cheating. And so Superman's just like, so you mean as punishment for being Batman, right? That's really what it was. You just doing Batman stuff. It's still hilarious, right? So in that moment, Absolute Superman is just like, how touching, right? And Batman looks over and he's like, who's the kid? And Superman tells him, he's Darkseid. They are all Darkseid. And Batman's like, then go get him. And then he looks over at Absolute Batman and just says, I'll take this one, right? Dude, it's so dope. It's so amazing. And so in that moment, right? Absolute Batman, his voice just drenching with arrogance, right? Let's do it, rich boy. And so Batman's like, I fought a lot of Batmen lately, but that is the ugliest bat symbol I have ever seen, which is clearly heresy. That's outrageous. It's an outrageous statement, right? But in that moment, Absolute Batman grows in size, right? And that's when he looks at Batman and says, how's it looking now? And Batman just makes a joke, right? It's growing on me. And so the two of them start going at it, right? Absolute Batman comes lunging at him with his axe, right? Just like swinging all over the place, hitting everything he can. He's got no finesse. He does not have any of the finesse of Batman. But what he lacks in finesse, he makes up for in brute strength. And that's what's so dope here, because Batman cannot fight Absolute Batman in conventional ways, right? He can't fight him hand to hand the way he normally would. He's too strong, he's too big, he's too powerful. So Batman does the only thing he can do. He outthinks him and he outmaneuvers him, right? Literally, like he just kind of dodges out of the way and then throws a couple of gas bombs or attaches a couple of gas bombs to his chest and just tells him, you've got something on your chest. And when Absolute Batman looks down, they explode, and it's enough to momentarily send him flying. It's effectively a distraction. And so following that, the tendrils of Absolute Batman's cape end up piercing into Batman. Literally, they puncture him, right, and just attack him. And then at that moment, we jump back to Absolute Wonder Woman. Dude, this battle is insane. This battle is amazing, right? And so the heart tells us, across the way, Diana is tiring. There's been no rest between rounds, no break, only battle. She knows that she and the champions must end this soon. And so that's when she says, enough tricks, face me. There has to be more to you than this, sister, than him. And that's where Absolute Wonder Woman says, there is only him, sister, and he is nearly here. And so at that point, you jump back to Superman fighting Absolute Superman, right? And it says, Clark too feels his body tiring. These beings, they are younger, scrappier, but their dark side, down to the atom. In a blast of desperation, he intensifies his heat vision, ramping it up to 1,000,000 bursts per second. His hope is that the radiation will disrupt the boy's molecular structure, freeing him from Darkseid. If there's anything to free, anything left, the tactic does not work, but the beams transform the boy's cape on an atomic level, melding, crystallizing the particles into a cage 1,000 times harder than diamond. It encases him, right? And so that's where it says, Clark only has a split second to catch his breath before the piece is shattered by that voice again, so familiar, which is Darkseid screaming at everybody, right? Fight, you insects, fight. And so in that moment, realizing Darkseid's still there, and he's seemingly the linchpin behind it all, the heart says, in that moment, all of Clark's anger focuses with laser-like clarity on a new target. Clark gives it everything, every ounce of energy, physical, mental, spiritual. It's a punch that could break the world, even a god's concentration, at least for a moment. And so when that happens, everyone snaps back. For a moment, everyone snaps back. Absolute Batman, Absolute Superman, and Absolute Wonder Woman. Superman broke the hold, right? And so that's when he tells him he has no hold over you anymore. And so where the Absolute Trinity thanks the Trinity for basically freeing them, Superman says, you can thank us by joining the fight to defeat Darkseid. And that's where Lex just kind of scoffs at everything, right? And he says, joining the fight. Like, look at you heroes. Do you really think it's that easy? You just one-shot Booster Gold, and now the fight's over, and the day is saved, and you get the Heart of Apocalypse. No, right? And that's where Superman's like, what are you saying, Luthor? And he says, I'm saying you didn't free anybody, you idiot. He let them go. And Superman's just like, why? And that's where Luthor says he doesn't need them anymore because he is here. And Darkseid emerges from the body of Booster Gold and just says, greetings, champions. And the heart says they look at each other, these heroes from twin Earths, and they know. Now, they know that they are at the end now. The final round is all that's left. For a split second, Clark's mind goes back to that night, that game, the moment when they were each a few squares from the end of the board, one move away from winning, the finish line. All that was left to do was roll the dice. And so they all just go charging into this battle against Darkseid. And it's incredible, right? Because it says, and so they do. They take their turn together. But just like that night, the turn ends before any winning happens. Red fills the room. Red fills the sky. Red fills everything until they are all gone. Diana, Bruce, the heroes from another world, they were all hit with Darkseid's Omega beams. And in that instant, they were incinerated. They never stood a chance in the first place. And it says Clark roars, fighting through the blast, burning but alive, willing his cells to hold. Maybe it's the Omega energy he has accumulated. Maybe it's the knuckles that charged him back in round 1, the extra bit of solar energy that he absorbed. Or maybe it's something else, something more. But Clark has just enough to push through. And that's where he starts screaming at Darkseid, right? Is that all you've got? Right? Like, is that it? And so at that point, Darkseid tells him, impressive, Kryptonian, now go on. I am waiting. And that's where Superman looks. And it says, in that moment, Clark notices Luthor behind him. He must have shielded Lex from Darkseid's beam. And that's where Superman says, Lex, let's do this together, right? You heard him. He's waiting. But then he looks out and he realizes, he says, oh my God. And that's where Lex says, he is waiting, Superman. He's waiting for a winner. And in that moment, Lex fires off a shot and kills Superman, right? He just kills him on the spot, right? Superman calls out, he's like, no, right? And Lex just obliterates him. And it says, and it's at this moment that Lex uses his suit's one final blast. And so it is done. We have our King Omega. The tournament is over. But here's a crazy thing, right? Because the big question that everybody had here is what goes on with the absolute trinity now, right? Because if the absolute trinity is here, then how's that going to reflect in the absolute universe? That question gets answered because at that point we jump back to before the whole contest began, right? Before the champions fought to claim the title of King Omega, the whole tournament, right? And it says, in a time of legion and darkness, a future world. And that's where you pick up with the Legion of Darkseid, where you have Saturn Girl going and talking to Darkseid himself. And the statement's made, can you sense the false bravado in Saturn Girl's voice? Of course, the shake in her steps gives her away. She has seen the worst this universe has to offer. Whole worlds crushed under his grip, lives extinguished in a blink of his eye, souls erased with a low sigh, madness is his mercy. And so she says, you called for me, King Omega. And it says, and yet, against every ounce of her being, she feels compelled to stand before the King Omega, the final god, Darkseid. And that's where Darkseid addresses her directly and says, you are correct. Do not be afraid. You serve me well, Saturn Girl. I can sense my enemy's efforts to stop me from completing my work. And so it is time that you understand what is to come. Before I created this place, I was just a god, one of many within the fourth world. But I knew I needed to be more, that all destinies led me to this direction. I killed and I stole. I destroyed what I hated and what I loved. Those Omega acts were not sacrifices. They were nothing in the grand scheme in the order that I demanded. Killing all of the celestial beings gave me the Omega energy to create a world in my image, a reflection of Earth Zero with my presence in every cell. But this past moment that you witness here eludes me. That point in their history, the present in their eyes, is unwritten. My creations there resist. They retain free will from their destiny. Now, this is an important statement. Before we continue on, this is an important statement, and it gives us context to what's happening in the larger absolute universe. One of the things to remember, for those of you guys who haven't really been catching up or you forgot, one of the things to remember is that Joker was one of the first ones to figure it out, but a lot of other people have as well. That while they don't know that Darkseid is the source of their universe, they know that there their universe is perverted. Things are opposite of what they're supposed to be. It's very Earth 3-like in a lot of ways. Now, they don't know what Earth 3 is, but it's very much that way. Superheroes are the underdogs, that the universe lends itself to entropy, destruction, death, right? It's a very, very dark place. But when it comes to the absolute trinity and anybody else who's there, right? Catwoman, absolute Martian Manhunter, absolute Green Lantern, Joe Mullane, Green Arrow, that they do not bend to the form and function of the universe. They have not become the darkest version of themselves. They're not evil, right? And so because they're resisting the control of Darkseid, because they're resisting their evil pull, and we've seen it, right? If you look at these different stories, absolute Wonder Woman doesn't do the best job of doing it, but absolute Batman and absolute Superman do. Experiencing these moments when it would be very, very easy to become dark, to fall down that path, they resist. They choose not to fall down that path. And that's what separates them from Darkseid's destiny. And so in the moment right now, when he talks about this present is unwritten, it's basically DC telling us they're at a fork in the road, right? Either they could go on to become very dark versions of themselves, or they can go on to make the world better. We don't know yet, and maybe we haven't decided. I don't know, right? But that's where Saturn Girl says, do you wish for us to go back to that moment and kill them? And Darkseid says, no. Go to their near future where they are weaker and retrieve them. Do not engage with their present. So the version of the absolute trinity that we see here in this tournament, fighting the trinity, like I said, they are from the absolute universe, but they're from the future of the absolute universe, not the present day. So that's how DC is able to bring them here without conflicting with the stories that are being told in the here and now in the absolute universe. It's pretty genius, to be honest, right? And so that's where Saturn Girl says, the walls between our world's timelines are strong. And Darkseid tells her, this world is so much more than a time or a place. Indeed, it is more than just a world. It is a weapon, one that I will use when the time is right. But first, I will use it to create fear within those who dare to defy me. And so once they're all captured, they're presented. And Saturn Girl says that, may I present your horsemen, the heralds of your return, shadows of your creations, perfect for your Omega sanction to control. And Darkseid says, you have done well, Saturn Girl. Now I can feel the heroes plot to challenge me. They believe they can build Omega energy as I did, control the heart of Apocalypse, crown themselves King Omega, i.e. the tournament has begun. And so Saturn Girl says, then I will go with your legion and stop them. And Darkseid says, no, let the tournament happen. Let them continue. Their efforts are in vain. As they struggle, they will merely fuel the fire pits of Earth and light my way back. You will instead find me a vessel to possess. You are my most loyal servant. You must be rewarded. Look into my mind, gaze into its depths. So this answers a lot of things, right? It answers whether or not the version of Darkseid that we saw in Booster Gold is truly Darkseid. And while it is, it's not Darkseid from like the past or the future. It's a portion of Darkseid from the absolute universe, a fraction of his power, which really begs the question, if a fraction of Darkseid's power was enough to destroy everyone except for Superman, then what happens when the real Darkseid shows up on the scene? But in the moment, right, Saturn Girl says, I would never dare look into your mind. I doubt I would even be able to process what I've witnessed. And Darkseid just says, do it. And so Saturn Girl says, of course. And so we're told Saturn Girl could not find the words to describe what she saw. It was more than the past, present, or future. It was beyond darkness. In that moment, she understood something, a single phrase that haunted all who heard it. Darkseid is. Imagine not hearing those words, but feeling them within your every cell, your being, knowing that it's truth. Saturn Girl only saw that Darkseid would always win, that in the end, there would be nothing. All of life, past, present, and future, are meaningless. There is only Darkseid. But for a brief moment, she saw a glimpse of something else, a light that shined, a creation of a different kind. She saw Doomsday. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this to an end. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. It's amazing. I told you guys it was dope. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.